Andres, I think we know each other from 2020, right, Andres? During the pandemic, all that craziness, and we start doing things together. It was fun
Yep.
through through Maggie, right?
Yes.
Maggie was the connector. We always know some nice people through other nice people.
Yep. Yes. 100%.
Yeah, honor to have you here. And Andres is writing a new book, and he has one of these amazing initiatives in facilitation, which is the name itself. It's You Facilitate, which means that you we want people to get themselves facilitating process, right? To get them doing better conversations and getting better meetings and better engagement. So Anders is, I think, spearheading this in a global scale. So how many people are working with You Facilitate right now?
205 people in 41 countries.
Yeah, so that's a big, big, big accomplishment. So Andres, thank you for
Thank you. Thank you.
joining us. And yeah, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. I'm honored to be here. As Fernando mentioned, we've known each other for a while. Thanks to Maggie. And I always love talking to other facilitators because we can all geek out about facilitation, right? uh, so it's nice to kind of be with fellow practitioners. I envision this 90 minutes or so more conversational. I may have like a little brief presentation, but really it's more about like, let's talk about what's comes up for you, what's raised. Unless we kind of even like workshop some things that you might be working going on because we're a small group, which I really appreciate. I think we can also do like a deeper dive and have more intimacy. Um, but yeah, I mean, in many ways, when Fernando asked me to present here, it was really kind of about like I wanted to share more about the book that I'm writing, and so I'm gonna just do a brief presentation about like what the book's about, and then I actually really appreciate Robin how you started us because I think speaks to what I'm trying to convey in this modern day world that we need. So essentially, my book, and I'm sharing my screen now. Hopefully, you can see it is called Rituals 2.0 Pathways to Reconnection, Healing, and Hope in an Uncertain World. And the idea came from the fact that all of you, I'm sure, can relate. Some workshops feel more than workshops. They feel like there actually something happens, something transcendent happens. People connect at a deep level. It's not just kind of doing something like accomplishing, oh, we did the checkbox. It's like people connect at a really hard, deep level. And after doing this for over a decade and more, I was like, you know what? Like these feel like rituals, like we become like facilitators in some ways are becoming, or we are modern day shamans, right? Where we were the fire keepers, if you will, because as facilitators, as you know, we're not leading from the front, we're leading from the back. We're holding the space with others for things to emerge. And it really kind of came to me when one of my mentors, his name is Hector Aristizabal. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Sorry for backtrack. Let me backtrack a little bit. Venezuelan American living in Mexico. I'm a therapist by training. I'm an improv actor. I'm a community organizer. And in my non-linear journey of what I've built over the years, one of my mentors, his name is Hector, Colombian. He was doing this beautiful workshop in the jungles of Colombia, and he was working with ex-FARC combatants and the victims of the FARC, and they were doing a reconciliation piece. They were using the work of Joanna Macy, work to reconnect, for those of you that don't know, who recently passed away earlier this year in July. And so he was doing the truth mandala, which is a type of workshop, a ritual of sorts, where people, like the circle is divided into different segments, and then people walk through the different elements to feel different emotions along that. And Hector's telling me the story of what he's doing in the jungle. And he mentions in one part of the story that one participant in particular was so overwhelmed that she just crashed into the ground. And right away, the instinct was for people to go and rush to her to see if she was okay. And Hector said, stop them from doing so. And I was like, Hector, like, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, I mean, like, he's telling me the story. I'm like, why do you stop people from supporting them? And he said, I stopped them because people rush to help others because they don't know what to do with their own pain. And that landed so deeply for me because I'm a helper. I'm a therapist. Like I like helping others, but oftentimes it's me not paying attention to my own suffering, right? I try to help others in ways as a way to kind of numb or distract myself from what I'm feeling. And I thought to myself, wow, like I wonder what this is like for others. And I started thinking also there was Joanna Macy wrote a book or has a poem that talked about the fact that in this time of our lives, let me actually see if I can pull it up really quickly. It's called bestiary. where she's talking about in our lifetime, you have all these species that have been gone extinct, right? And it's just ridiculous of how much that is. And she's basically kind of honoring each of these different animals that have gone extinct. And this is a quote that really kind of got to me. Dive me deep, sister whale, in this time we have left. Deep in her mother ocean where I once swam, gilled and finned. The salt from those early seas still run in my tears. Tears aren't enough anymore. Give me a song for sadness too vast for my heart, for a rage too wild for my throat. And this is happening in the midst as we have the world, Trump in the White House doing the things he's doing. The world's just collapsing in many different ways. It's like, and it's like we as humans cannot hold the intensity of the pain. We're not hardwired to be individuals to contain that. We need each other. We need containers. We need rituals. And so the idea was like, hey, rituals are not new. They've been around for millennia. Ever since we were humans, we created rituals to help ourselves transition to moments of crisis and times. Why have we, why don't we continue to do that in many ways? And I started thinking about this because rituals have a bad rap. Oftentimes you think of rituals as stuffy, boring, old things that just, when the young kids, the young ones, like, and even the old people, they're like, what the hell? Like I don't want to go to church for 90 minutes. It's like, it's boring. It doesn't really appeal to me. In fact, a lot of religions have lost a lot of members while spirituality keeps growing. There's a hunger for spirituality, but institutionalized churches have lost membership in many ways, right? And so I was thinking these rituals they kind of lost their essence. They lost their soul. I feel that the workshops that I facilitate and the ones that I'm sure that you facilitate are much more meaningful, and they create people these different connections. So I said, well, what if we redefine rituals and thought about what are some of the modern day activities that we have that could be considered rituals, and what makes them rituals? And so that's kind of where I came up with this idea of Rituals 2.0, right? And so in the book, essentially, which will be published sometime next year, I'll send you a link so you can sign up and have early access. I basically talk about what are rituals, why do we need them? I'll briefly talk about it today as well. I talk about the science of rituals, the science of emotions, why we can't do this alone. And then the heart of the book is really like 4 pathways to feelings. Because essentially what I feel we need nowadays is to feel our feelings. It's just to feel the immensity of the complexity of what's happening. The joy, the hope, the terror, the anxiety, all of it together. And so the pathways to allow us to feel that, the very first one I put there is workshops. And as facilitators, we can create workshops that will allow space for the multiplicity of feelings. I then talk about therapy. I've been in therapy for 20 plus years. I think it's one of the best ways you can improve your facilitation is go to therapy or become a coach. Or work with a coach. And then I talked about games and the certain types of games like Boal's game from Theater of the Oppressed and other kind of more like spontaneous activities. And then talk about nature as kind of a always evergreen space for rituals. And so the idea was to kind of help people think through that. Now, I also kind of defined that rituals essentially in some ways, you have the traditional ones, which are often inherited from religion or culture. And the ones I'm trying to kind of reframe as the rituals I'm talking about are improvised or adapted. They're not they're not necessarily passed down. They can be tweaked and adjusted, right? We all do LS, but we adjust and tweak based on what we're doing. So there's a lineage, but we customize to a context. Traditional rituals are scripted and repeatable, and they're passed down. Again, that can feel stuffy. We might adjust an eco cycle depending on the context. We might adjust different things, but the idea is that we have a structure, but we're able to play with it a little more, and it's based in response to what's happening in the context. Rituals, talked about, they focus on symbolism and form. You had the crosses on the churches and the different, like the communion, that kind of stuff, which again, not necessarily a bad thing for people that find meaning in that. The thing is, a lot of those symbols lost meaning to many new generations. So instead, the idea is to find what is the presence, the emotional element that will connect you with that transcendent part of what's happening, right? And it's also co-created. It can be a leaf that you found under your garden and you bring it to here. It can be the picture of Fernando's son with, the proud son of his carrying his coach, the jiu-jitsu. Like, you decide what it is. But the point is that you bring something that has a deep emotional presence and connection for you. Again, rituals often are tied to ceremonies, religions, or sacred traditions. And the idea here is to take them out of that And so they can go for anything. It can be secular, it can be an everyday experience. It doesn't just have to be for those special moments in time, especially given how much we need this in the modern day. And then oftentimes these were designed to mark transition periods. These were the rites of passages, that were used in traditional rituals. I still think that's valuable and that can still be done. But the idea is that Rituals 2.0 is more about helping us metabolize emotion, help us process the intensity and the confusion and the complexity of all and doing it together. So that's what the distinction I try to make between rituals. And again, the idea that facilitating workshops, therapy, games, and nature allow us to move from rituals to Rituals 2.0. At this point, let me pause before I go into that. And I just wanted to kind of ask an open-ended question, which is, what about rituals? I mean, obviously, you knew what this topic was for, and you chose to be here. So, what was your personal connection to this topic? What brought you here? And what are some reactions you've had to what's been shared? And we would have done a 1-2 for all if we were bigger, but we're a small group. We'll just kind of just popcorn our way around. Margaret, please.
Sure. What's interesting is where I work, what we started to do a couple of years ago, and it's part of facilitation as well, is before we start a meeting with a particular, like the small team I work on, we always do a check-in, and that's almost become a ritual now. So it's actually finding things that you can do with a group of people that you practice with, and then all of a sudden it just becomes, this is what we do when we start a meeting.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Definitely. And the check-in in your group might be different than a check-in in another group, but the point is both are rituals that help people get grounded into the space. And the other thing to think about rituals is rituals. I was reading a book called Rights to Liberation in the research for my book, and he says that rituals are a pathway to becoming human. We're born Homo sapiens, but we become humans through rituals. And so when you think about work culture and culture in general, when you have these kind of check-ins in your place, for example, that creates a work culture in your organization. So people that come to work in your place, like they know, oh, this is how we do things here. This is what it means to do that here. If I go to perhaps another group, it's different. But again, rituals is how we teach others how we do things where we are. So has a close tie to culture as well. But thank you for being here, though. Other people, what attracted you about the topic? What inspired you, and what or some or comments or reactions to what's been said so far?
Well, thank you so much for being here to talk about this. This is probably my greatest curiosity as a facilitator right now. In my own religious background, have found that rituals, as you described, don't hold maybe the same weight as they used to. Some do, some don't. And I've been part of communities that are trying to find ways for faith to make sense
Mm-hmm.
and to figure out what rituals we fight to keep alive, what rituals we can let go.
Yeah.
And having spent years doing that in my own faith journey, I guess I would say, I find myself now asking that question about groups I facilitate with. And many of
Mm.
them are kind of in this space as well, where they might be faith or religion adjacent, but they are not practitioners in a traditional sense. And so they too are hungry for a ritual, a way of meeting that includes
Mm-hmm.
that. But the old rituals, the go-tos, are no longer going to serve.
Yeah.
So how do I
Definitely.
help groups find their new rituals, I guess, as part of my curiosity.
I love it. Thank you. Linda.
So this question has come up for us just to just to reveal. I work for provincial government, so we have a workforce of 37,000. And so the questions come up within lesson design and lesson planning. We use the traditional model of box when we do our lesson plans, but the ritual parts of it are meeting the needs of the learners in a world where, as you say, there is like highly charged and perhaps polarized communities coming into larger learning spaces. And say when we look at a lesson plan, our rituals might be how we welcome people, how we set expectations. Some of that is group agreements. How are we going to maintain that space, hold that space to acknowledge the emotions, but not go down those rabbit holes? Like, what does that container look for folks? And how we do our beginnings and our endings. I even reflect on my organization that we tend to do goodbyes very poorly. People move on to teams, or they wrap up a project, or a project's taken away from them because of financial concerns, but yet they put 5 years of effort into that, and it's like, well, you're just on with the next. But it is those goodbyes, I feel, that are very indicative of organizational culture as well as the welcomes. So it's come up for us in those kinds of conversations as facilitators.
I love it, and I couldn't agree more that the goodbyes, both how we come in and how we leave, these are our spaces, because rituals mark a sacred space when you come in, and you also leave it. So those moments have to be marked off, and so I love that you're thinking and advocating for that. Shumi? If you're speaking, I can't hear you. I don't know if others can.
No, we can't hear Mashumi.
Is it audible right now?
Yes.
Am I audible? Oh,
Yes, now
maybe
we can
my
hear you.
Bluetooth is not functioning well. So sorry. So it's a very nice, topic to reflect upon. And as you just mentioned about the rituals, so I would say, I would talk from the coaching perspective, not majorly from the facilitation, because facilitation is something new that for me. So I would say more in terms of accountability, like, many a times when we meet these people, we always ask, like, what do you commit? What do you want to commit? What do you want to do? And majorly we focus on three major parts. One is the reflection. Say, suppose when we meet for the second time, we look at the reflection, what was the reflection, that he had. And then we look at the progress when certain pointers or action plans have been chalked. So what is the progress on that? And ultimately the projection, what do you want to, achieve before we meet next? So I think these are the three major focus that we always, kind of habituated to ask. And towards the end, we also kind of reinforce, like, how are you going to celebrate the victory, even a small actions that you have taken? How are you going to pat yourself? How are you going to motivate yourself? Because the motivation has to be from within rather than people imposing you. How do you, I would say, celebrate that small win? So these are something that I think as a ritual that I kind of follow.
I love it. And in fact, that's so out of the 4 pathways, you have workshops and also coaching therapy is one of them pathways as well, like a modern day space for where feelings can be felt in multiple ways. You don't have to have one way of doing it. And as coaches and therapists, we have structures that allow for that to happen, right? So again, thank you for bringing that perspective as well. Robin.
Yeah, I think what interested me most about this was probably because of the time of year. So with it being around Christmas time, and I'm a person who celebrates Christmas, and there are a lot of rituals around that, whether it's Christmas Eve service at church or it's family gift exchange, which, as a little parenthetical, at Thanksgiving, when my family was together, we were talking about this year's gift exchange, and my sister and I just wanted to make one little tweak, just one, and that was not going to happen. So we got sideways with each other. So rituals can be very strongly held. And then others, like, why are we doing this? I guess because we've always done it. But anyway, so the time of year interested me. Also, I've listened a good bit to a guy by the name of Charles Vogel, VOGL, and he's got a podcast and a book, and he does work around this. And belonging is really what he gets to. And I think
Yeah.
ritual gives a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So when you really feel belonging, don't mess with it. It's like, don't take that away because I'm belonging.
Yep.
And then one little parenthetical too to add to what Linda said. So a guy that I used to work for who was just crazy, like he was something else. You'd have to have met Clay to like really get the gist. But whenever a team would conclude something, or even if a team was starting, he was our chief administrative officer and then chief legal officer of the organization. So he had a pretty wide span. He would put on some crazy something, like it might be a cap or, a weird hat or a cape or whatever. And he'd come with bells and really loud, and he'd have a proclamation. He'd unroll it and he would read out this proclamation and he'd go through the halls ringing bells. So it was really fun. And when you first heard it, it was like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. He's crazy. But then people came to want that, because they got the recognition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
happy to be here. This is going to be fun.
thank you for sharing. And a couple of things in your comments that I want to highlight. One is that rituals are tied to identity, right? This and belonging is tied to identity. I am this way. I belong to this group, and therefore I'm going to have a ritual to reinforce the way that I am and my worldview. And in a very diverse world, we end up clashing with each other because my worldview, your worldview, and our rituals don't always clash into our. And I think part of the invitation that we have as facilitators is, how do we create new rituals that incorporate different elements? And it's a both and. You can still have different, rituals that are important for you, but if you're working with different types of folks that don't see it the same way, how do we then create with them new ways of belonging? So it's about all of us, not just us or them, right? So I think this is what's hard about this current time in our life where everything's so polarized. The more the world becomes, you probably heard the term VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, the more we seek certainty, the more we look for things that make us feel grounded. And we often do that in identity politics, what we know, et cetera. And I think the invitation for us as people that are in the space of facilitation is, how do we hold the gray? How do we contain the space for new things to emerge? And I think rituals that are co-created can allow for that. And while I love the example of the bells and this person, like I think that's it worked for your group, but I also wonder how many people were impacted in a way, perhaps maybe some liked it, some didn't. And I'm wondering, like, the invitation for me would be like, how do we co-create a ritual that invites celebration? And so then the group has ownership. And it's not just crazy fun guy that's very extroverted and willing to do that and take a risk, but rather the community and the group shape something together that has meaning for all of them. And so again, I think it worked in your case, and I applaud it. That's awesome. And in some cases, that may not work. And for those cases, my whole thing is, how do we then shape the conditions for new things to emerge? But at the end of the day, it's about creating a container for the multiplicity of things that are happening in the world, and to mark off these moments, because it's very traumatic, right? Endings and beginnings can be traumatic and they can be painful, but again, it's how do we kind of hold the space for that? Thank you. Fernando, do you want to add anything about obviously you're hosting, you're organizing, but like anything particular connection you have to rituals that you want to share?
Yeah, one thing that you said about us as facilitators being the shamans, the modern shamans. And I heard this from a very nice guy. He's a clown and a facilitator, a consultant. And he was saying that the role of the shaman on the first people was just to keep them awake, keep them dancing, keep them healthy and connected through rituals.
Yeah.
So I just was remembering him saying this in a group. But he was really like a real shaman, the way he was dressed and the way he behaved. So I was just shocked by this memory when he said that.
Well, and I think the thing about facilitators is that we have a range of ways that we are in the world, the same way that you're diverse. Some people perhaps feel more comfortable putting the hats on and the custom and kind of actually embodying that in a much more provocative way. I'm thinking of the role of the trickster in Theater of the Oppressed. You know, the person that stands in the town square with a hat has 4 colors, so people can argue about what color the hat is. You know, like there's that element. And there's perhaps some of us that perhaps straddle both worlds. You know, like I always say, you know, we are a You Facilitate. We're not a grassroots organization. We're not going to start the meeting with calling our ancestors and stuff like that, unless a client wants that, but we're not going to offer that. We're also not McKinsey or Deloitte. We're going to bring some heart to the space. We're like in the middle. And so I find that many times if this resonates with you, the idea of rituals and spirituality and faith, we find ourselves somewhere in the between where we want to bring some heart and faith and spirit into their meetings, but we know that there might be some eye roll if we don't do it well, or people will be turned off around that. So we have to navigate that in a way that, that honors who we are. But I think, and there's other people perhaps who are just like complete, like I just did a workshop on rituals in Portugal, and it was co-facilitated with me and another person who basically, she was just very open, like, I'm going to do a ritual for me. I'm not imposing it, just like want you to know. And like, she did her whole thing, and she's saluted the different directions and called her ancestors, etc. And then I was okay with that design because I wanted people to see the diversity of which people come into rituals and the impact they're going to have. Because I work with clients like the IDB, the Gates Foundation. If I start a meeting like that, I won't get hired again. You know, it's likely they'll just like, what the hell? That's not what we asked for. Obviously, because you've trained with Fernando, I'm sure you all know you co-design everything. So you would have been checking in across the agenda before you got to that point. But the point is, like, even naming that would be a bit kind of like, what, like, do you know your audience? Like, what's going on, right? So for us at You Facilitate, again, like, how do we weave in some of these elements and help people go there? I took a massage therapy class back in college, my senior year. I had like an extra credit or whatever. And one thing the instructor said has stuck with me, and I actually find to be very valuable. He said, it's not how deep you go, but how you go deep, right? And it's about the process in which you're able to go deep into the space with people. And again, so when you're thinking about the design of these activities, these workshops that we facilitate, if you're too in the nose in the beginning, you'll shut people down, some people down, right? And it depends on your audience. You know, I'll send you all afterwards. My first book that I wrote was on a leadership class that I teach, which was basically trying to explain to people. I asked a question for my students: what does it take to lead in the 21st century? And I would ask them to come up with an answer, and then I would grade them based on that. And so I wrote a book asking myself the same question, and my answer was facilitation. And in that book, around why facilitation is so needed in this modern day, I say that when you're facilitating, you have these 3 big rocks. You know the story. If you have a sand, rocks, and a jar, the only way you'll fill the jar with the rocks and the sand is if you put the big rocks first and then the sand. If you put the sand first, then the rocks won't fit. So the big rocks of facilitation, and you may know them by different names, but it's about who's it for, what's it for, and what are the constraints. You have to think about these 3 big rocks as you're designing. Then you can fill it. Are we using Menti? Are we using this LS? Whatever it is, but you got to have those 3 things super clear. And so again, when you're thinking about rituals and bringing more rituals into the space, you still have to go back to that. Who's this for? What's this audience? Who are they? What are the symbols they care about? You know, what do they want to accomplish? What's this for? And then what are the constraints? You know, do we have an hour? Do we have a day? Do we have 5 days? All these things are going to influence our design. And then depending on that, then we can weave in some of these other elements around that. But at the end of the day, is again, how do we infuse that in those moments? And it could be as simple as what we just did in the beginning with taking a moment to be thinking about what we're grateful for. I love that. Very simple, non-denominational, just about being alive, right? It could be as simple as a breath. It could be a check-in. It doesn't have to be the things you see in churches. It can be whatever you want it to be. But the thing is, for me, is the invitation for people to pause. So let me kind of bring us back to some of the concepts from the book that I want to share with you all. So the idea here, in some ways, is while no rituals look the same, they have 3 essential components, if you will. There's an intention. There's a clear purpose. It's not, we're not here just, oh, we gather, great. No, why are we here? The why and the intention is super clear. There's also attention. You bring attention to shift the presence from what you think is happening from the outside world to now a sacred moment. And again, you did this beautifully right now, Robin, when you came in here and kind of brought us into a space. Fernando inviting us to turn off our notifications. Like, we are creating the conditions to shift our attention intentionally to this space that we're creating here together. And then there's a structure. There's some sort of structure, right? I try to give you like explain how this is going to happen, what's going to happen. We know we have till, an hour from now or so to work about this, but these are like the kind of big elements of rituals. But as you can see, there's a lot of playing room. We can fit a lot of things in that space, right? Then though, within the workshops though, the ones that I have found to be most powerful and really kind of bring in these elements of ritual, they have these elements. There's a connection to self, right? Where you invite people to really reflect upon who are they in the world, whether it's that team, that organization, whether it's a movement, whatever it is, there's some sort of pause and invites people to shift their attention with intention to who am I and what's going on, right? And you help people then think about what's happening and how is this moment in time different than the past? How am I different? Who am I becoming? All these self-reflective questions. Along the way, you then invite people to connect them with others, to share some of that experience, to do some storytelling where you're able people to kind of share those reflections that are deep. They're usually very important to others. And what you're doing here is you're beginning to weave together the belonging that you talked about, Linda. You're beginning to really kind of, Robin, sorry, you're beginning to weave together the belonging of this new grouping that's coming together. Then there's also a connection to knowledge, if you will. Connection to knowledge, and by that I mean, oftentimes, let's go here. Here we go. We don't just live in the inner world. We also are engaging with the external world. And so we want to invite people to connect what's happening inward with the external world, and then to do some sort of assimilation, reflection around that piece, right? And now that you've done that connection to yourself, to others, and to the external world through knowledge, then there's a connection to purpose, which is oftentimes tied to all these three different elements. Why are we here? Now, when I'm facilitating a workshop and I'm designing one, these are things that I'm thinking about and I'm designing intentionally to be able to weave in questions, prompts, etc. For example, again, I love that I can just like use the lingo that we get at LS. Like I love the 9 whys, for example. It's a very short activity, but it's so powerful. Why? Because it connects me to self, connects me to others, and purpose. Knowledge can come later on, but right away with that 20-minute activity, I can get a group of people to really right away, boom, come deep quickly. Now, again, I might not start with the 9 whys, like, hey, hi, let's do 9 whys. I then have to first frame it. I have to create a container for them to know, why are we going to do the 9 whys? How does this fit the larger agenda we're trying to think about? Why should you follow me as a facilitator and trust me to invite you to these things in the midst of that? So then when you're thinking about the workshops to make it more, not ritualistic, but more heartfelt, more spiritual, if you will, I think these are kind of 4 things to think about when you're doing that. The last thing I'll say, and then we'll come back and open it up to a group again, is this idea that, let me go here. The structure that I often use for facilitation comes from something I call the 5-act play, but essentially has an arc that I think, again, if you think about rituals having a structure, so again, you have the intention, the attention, and the structure. The structure that I often have for my workshops, there's some sort of arrival and grounding. And again, you modeled that beautifully here when we first came in. There's some space, say, hey, we're coming into this new space. And in this new space, there's an element of different things for us to explore, right? There's the framing the invitation. And this is a part that comes to like the intellectual part. Again, people, especially in certain contexts that are not very touchy-feely, the clients that we tend to work with, IDB, World Bank, Gates, experts knowledge, right? They want to know why. Why are you not wasting my time? What am I here to learn? We're in a world where knowledge is king, fortunately or fortunately. And we have to at least understand that and know that's part of the audience, what they're asking for. So we have to understand and give them enough information to trust us along the process. Yes, we want it for the process to emerge. We want that for things to emerge as a talk, but you got to give them some sort of endpoint. Otherwise, they'll check out and they won't go along with you. So there's a framing invitation. Then there's the challenge and exploration. And this is really kind of where is the heart of the workshop. We kind of told them, we welcomed them, we framed the invitation, we did a series of warm-ups to get there. Now, this is the meat of it all. This is why we're here, to really unpack and challenge and explore whatever it is the objective. Remember, the what's it for? That's what this is for, right? We will unpack these. And this is where, again, LS has a ton of different activities that we can kind of just go into. Then there's a harvesting and meaning making. We just did this activity. Let's process together what insights emerge. Again, always doing think about what we just talked about, connection to self, to others, to knowledge and purpose. Now we're sharing with others. It's all tied to purpose. So you're kind of just mixing all these different things together. And then there's the commitment and closure, and Mushumi, you talked about the coaching, the accountability piece. You got to have the kind of commitment at the end of this. So many times, I'm sure you all have gone through these workshops where people come out of it so excited and nothing happens. There might be a momentum to do something, but the leadership won't hire you to do a one-day event. And you told them, this is an ongoing thing. We got to have more support. People will be excited. You got to channel that commitment. But if there's no commitment from the leadership to move forward, it falls flat. And next year, we're talking about the same thing, slightly different, right? But there's a structure that when you're able to kind of put these things together, I have found that people feel connected in a way that's just more than just a regular activity. This is what I feel that's when workshops become modern day rituals. And again, perhaps you haven't used that language, but I'm fairly confident because you're here and because you train with Fernando and the team that you probably do some of these elements in your workshops already as is. So I'm going to pause here to see if you have any questions or reactions to what I just shared.
I have a question just in terms of, I mean, if you can do this well, you can do it in a short period of time or you can do it in a long period of time. And I guess I'm just checking that out. It's not, I'm guessing that, yeah, like this isn't like a whole day. You could actually do this in 90 minutes, right? If you plan it really well.
We're doing it right now. I mean,
Yeah.
as we speak, right? I mean,
Thanks.
the way I see it is here. I'm doing a whiteboard, so hopefully you can see this. You have the meta arc of the event, and this could be a 90-minute, a 2-day, a 5-day, doesn't matter. And within that, you have like many little peaks and valleys, right? Where essentially you might have, if you're doing a 3-day event, we're facilitating a 3-day event for the IMF next month. And so we might have the arc for all, but then maybe the first hour is a mini activity where you're having kind of the welcoming and framing, the framing invitation. There might be a little challenge and there's a closure. Now we go to a coffee break. The next activity, it builds on that, and now it's a little deeper. Again, it's not how deep you go, but how you go deep. And you kind of keep bringing people along the way. Then maybe on day 2, you get to the heart of it. Maybe you have the very challenging conversation you needed to have, but you couldn't have on day 1. And then you kind of process that, and then you culminate in day 3. But this could be 90 minutes. It could be 3 days. It could be a month. It could be a year. It could be a training schedule. But there's the meta and there's like the in-between elements. But even if you think about our session right now, we kind of had the grounding opening in some ways. My presentation was kind of framing the invitation and kind of giving you some knowledge and content to help you process some of this. And after we process, we're going to go to the heart of it, the challenge exploration piece, and then we'll close. So we're kind of like doing that as we speak.
I appreciated the way you listed each of these elements out as in the context of ritual. I'm currently designing a workshop. I think it'll be a 3-day workshop in January. Thanks. And I just realized that I think I skipped framing the invitation. Because this is a group that knows each other. We meet every year. I'm assuming the leader will take care of that. I just didn't pay attention to it. But by framing it as a ritual, that helps me remember, oh, yes, this deserves my attention. I need to give this time, do this well. So thank you. Yeah. It's sort of, I guess, framing something as a ritual elevates it in a sense from just something to tick off and helps us be more thoughtful.
I would say even if you don't frame it as a ritual, just the framing is so key, because framing is about the attention. It tells people like, here's where you should be paying attention, here's why. And again, whether you use the term ritual or not, to me, it's secondary, right? But it's about helping people understand intellectually and rationally, why are we here and why should we care?
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially nowadays, we are so used to be online, and it's easy to get in different spaces, right? We just click a link and we are there.
Yep.
But when we are in face-to-face, I remind myself, I always cheer people when they come, because lots of people, they plan to go to attend an event or workshop and they can't, or something happened, or life changes.
Yep.
So when we are all together in the same room at the same time, this by itself is already a ritual. It demands a celebration of we are here. We are starting this together.
Yep.
And sometimes I ask people to also be grateful about who are the people who are allowing you to be here. Because in order for you to be here, someone is taking care of your maybe children or your house or your work, or someone is out there allowing you to be here. So how can you be grateful to be here from them? And it's beautiful. Everybody has a time to think and share, and it always elevate the moment, and we can really be there.
And that's, again, describing again the essence of rituals. You know, there's the intention, the attention, the structure. These activities are helping people just pause for a second to think about these things and shift their attention from the moment, from the day to day, to being present, to thinking about these things. Rituals don't take a lot of effort. It really is just those three elements. And again, we weave them in different moments. How you celebrate, though, that to me then is a question. And that is more about the culture that you're working with. In some environments, if you're working perhaps with a group that's known each other, I just went to an event in Portugal last month. And there's a group of people that I would say more than half have been there for many years. They know each other. And so they opened with kind of celebration, but a very in your face, like, woohoo, we're here, like that kind of thing. But for the newcomers, we're like, okay, like it was like kind of like a bit too much, right? However, by day 3, I was there with them. Yeah. So I feel like it's all you have to have, like, who's this audience for? Like, like I think asking people to think, to reflect, to be grateful, more like introspective, maybe small pair, versus like, hey, put music on, party. Again, it depends on the culture that you're working with. Linda.
And perhaps you're going to be speaking to this a little bit later, but you mentioned about the value of co-creating these rituals.
Yes.
And so I'm curious about your process in terms of how much of that is in advance. What do you do when you feel you need to be adapting on the fly to co-create something that you might have had a fixed idea or some preliminary thoughts around?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also seeing how that can be really beneficial when, I don't know if this occurs for others, where you have mandatory requirement of people attending. It's not like, hey, yeah, I'm glad to drop a few bucks because this is something I feel passionate about and I want to hang out with all of these great people. It's like I was told to be here. It's mandatory. I'm a prisoner. As best we can, you try to encourage people to, well, that is your reality. And let's see what we can do to make the most valuable use of your time now that you are here. So, just if you could speak to, and perhaps you're going to, about the process of co-creation. Thank you.
So for background, so as I mentioned, I'm a therapist by training, and I spent 7 years working in the DC public mental health system. 5 of those at a psychiatric hospital where people did not choose to be there. They were put there because either they were dangerous to themselves or others, or they were going through a legal process where they had to be evaluated for the crimes that they had allegedly committed. And so oftentimes we were facilitating workshops with people that did not want to be there. I also then worked for a nonprofit that supported parents, and I had to do the court mandated training for parents. So people that were told by the courts, either you come here or you lose your child. So they did not want to be there either, right? So in those contexts, I think the most important thing is just to acknowledge the reality. Don't BS them. Like, they don't want to be there. That's okay. And I think it's about grounding people, and like you as the person with authority and power in the room, saying, I understand that many of you have chosen not to be here, and that's okay. And still, I appreciate you being here and listening to me right now. And basically, this is kind of, again, the grounding and the framing the invitation. That's the key. And how you frame the invitation is how you welcome them into a space where you can maybe just do a co-created ritual saying, hey, a 1, 2, 4 all thing. Let's talk about all the reasons why you don't want to be here today. What else you could be doing? Let's talk about the reasons what you think you could be getting out of here. And when you do that, you are co-creating an environment for them to then step into a space a little more. Now, you might not get the level of buy-in you get from people that choose to be somewhere. That's okay. one of the values that you facilitate is we say we nudge mountains. Systems change is about nudging mountains. You have to meet people where they're at. You can't expect them to be somewhere else. So you have to acknowledge they don't want to be here. That's okay. Let's name it. Let's have them talk about it. Let's have them process the paradox of like, God, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be watching TV at home or watching my Netflix instead of having to spend 2 hours with this person I don't even know. I don't want to be with my colleagues. But you naming that is very powerful. Another thing that this is, again, depending on the audience, and I'm not saying you do this. So when I say things, it's just like, it's context dependent. I'm just kind of giving you some ideas that I've seen work in the past. But that's also why I find psychodrama and like theater of the oppressed and these different modalities very helpful. In psychodrama, you can second somebody. When you get somebody on the stage and you're able to say things for them that they're not allowed to, they don't, like, you feel it, but like as a personal power, you can say, you know what, like, yeah, depending on your comfort level, I don't know if in the provincial government you can say you can curse or not. Like I might curse and say, well, fucking A, like what like I might just like throw F-bombs in there just to kind of get people riled up, saying like, I know, like I feel it. I wouldn't want to be here, and just like really acknowledging it, but in a way that feels authentic, not like me being condescending to them. But all these are the things that I would do to help co-create some of that in the moment. Having said that, as you know, 80% of the success of an event is in the prep. So what I would have done is with the champions, the powers that be, I would be then asking them saying, hey, like I would be presenting, like, they don't want to be here. And like, here are the options that I suggest for that. And then trying to kind of explain to them the trade-offs, because we know facilitation is all about trade-offs. I only have an hour. Well, in an hour, it'll be hard to get any kind of buy-in whatsoever in the first 40 minutes. And you want to you have to be able to kind of like, and just tell them. And at the end of the day, if they have the sign off, and they're aware of the consequences of what they're signing off on, then you deliver. Ideally, you have the trust with the client, so they believe in you and trust you, and they're able to take your advice. If they don't, though, they still have the trust of you when you come back and say, "Not I told you so," but like, here's why we thought that this might have been it for the future. What are the learnings we can get from here? Oh, maybe we shouldn't do this in an hour. Maybe it should be 2 hours. And I'm not telling you now. Like, here's the data. Like you were there, or whatever it is. So you have to kind of look at it more long term. In your case, and I'm making assumptions based on what you talked about, building curriculum, prevents, like, you seem to have in a place where you have like more like long-term iteration capability with this group. And so I might also just experiment and say, hey, let's see this as an experiment. What's the ultimate objective we're trying to accomplish? Let's try to create these small, co-create different activities. The other thing I would do is the co-creation. Whenever we design something, we try to connect with as many people as possible that are touching the event. So we kind of, it's not just a champion. Like, we're doing an event at Mexico City with a big foundation next year. And one of the things we're doing is we're interviewing not only the board, not only the staff, but the grantees that will be there. And when we hit all those three, all of them will get their input. And so then we kind of take those insights. We then design a draft agenda. We share with the committee. They'll get some feedback. But again, the more you can be inclusive on the front end before the event, the more you can co-create with them, the more you can then design for co-creation during the event and let that happen. Mashumi.
Yes,
I think
thank
Linda
you.
will
I
have
think
to leave in a few
Oh,
minutes.
yes. I'm glad you have
Okay,
your
I'll
question.
make it very fast. Thank you very much. I think it was very insightful, very informative. So, as you just talked about the rituals that is a part of the workshop, would you also suggest having some personal rituals too, so that following the other rituals becomes easier? Any personal rituals that you think, as a facilitator, one should follow?
I mean, when it comes to rituals, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So when I hear the word should, I kind of like I kind of sit back a little bit, because I don't think we should make people do anything. I think we can invite people to do things, and then if they do them or not, it's up to them. So we might invite people to say, hey, before you come to the event, we invite you to consider maybe taking some pause to journal or go for a walk. As you know, though, most people don't do pre-work. They just show up. So if you can build that into the space, maybe what you do is you do the opening, you do whatever, and then at some point during day one or the half day, you invite, hey, let's take a pause. Maybe we can invite people to just go around and go for a walk or in pairs and share, or do some journaling. So, and the other thing is, like, because rituals is such a charged word and is often associated with religion, and people have different views on religion, I don't use the word ritual at all. So I wouldn't use it unless you're working with a religious community that likes ritual or likes the word. I would just invite them to do activities. You may think of them as rituals, but I wouldn't use the term. So again, in that context, I might invite people to, hey, before we have the workshop on next week, just take half an hour to just kind of think about this question and journal. And if you want, feel free to bring an item that's personal and important for you to the event as a way to do that, to have some sort of grounding connection. So again, like I'm giving them invitations to do all this stuff. And then when they get there, it's all about being inclusive and normalizing that anything that happened is okay. If you didn't bring it, that's okay. If you brought it, great. Because again, what you don't want is you don't want people to fall into like, oh crap, I got it wrong, right? It's too easy to fall into that space. And as facilitators and coaches, we really don't want to get there. We might want to unpack that later on the afternoon, day 2, day 3, but definitely not in the beginning. So again, short answer is invite them to do activities, avoid, to the extent possible, avoid using the word should. And I think also this is culturally dependent. I work in some contexts in Latin America where the senior leaders want to make people do things and they should do these things, etc. You try to tell them the reasons why, they could try different invitations. At the end of the day, they choose to kind of like, this is mandated. And then you as a facilitator then have to kind of like frame the invitation. I know some of you were expected to do this and frame, and again, you're trying to normalize and humanize. That's the biggest piece. To me, the humanity piece is really, it's as simple as like going from the either or to the both and. To the extent that you can normalize the both and, I think will help people just have a lot of this complexity. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
So at this point, if there's any more questions or comments, happy to talk about that. So let me pause there. Any more questions or comments before we move on to the next part? So, and I think actually, Lori, you kind of went into the space I wanted to go next, which was I wanted for each of you to think about an agenda you have coming up or you've done in the past, to think about, given this conversation we've had, how could you weave in some of these activities to kind of bring some of the essence into that? And for this, because I would say maybe, Fernando, if you could help me, let's just do groups of 2. We'll give people maybe like, before we'll do a 1, 2 all, if you will. So maybe take a minute or 2 to think about what is an activity you have coming up in the near future. It could be a coaching session. It could be a retreat. And if you have something that's happening in the near future, think of something recent that you did, that you facilitated. Take a moment to think about like an agenda or that you perhaps want to kind of revisit, and then think about how you're going to then make it a little more, infuse some of these elements. So take about a minute or 2 just to kind of identify the agenda, maybe the high-level questions. Then we'll break you into groups of 2, and we'll maybe do like 5-6 minutes or so of pair share. And then we'll come back, we'll process, and we'll close. Does that sound? Cool. So 1 minute by ourselves.
Two rooms, 6 minutes, Andres.
Let's give people maybe 30 more seconds, and then we'll send them over. 30 more seconds to kind of grab some ideas, some thoughts, and then we'll get you into rooms. And just to set expectations, like it's 6 minutes, not a lot of time. Obviously, it's more like maybe pick one of the areas of the agenda that you feel perhaps more called to, maybe kind of play with that. That's an invitation, but do whatever you want. Go wherever you want, where you feel the energy, and then we'll come back and process. You'll have about 6 minutes in pairs. And then also, just again, I want to just give possibilities. Maybe if one of you has something really strong and you just want to workshop that with your peer, that's fine. You don't both have to share. Or if you both do, that's also fine. The point is, we just want, as a group, to just think about an agenda item and how to infuse more of these elements. Any questions before we go into our breakouts? Okay, 6 minutes. Thank you, Fernando. Welcome back, friends. As we often interject, pull you back out, right? Never gets old. Yeah, we'd love to just hear from some groups that feel energized to share about what emerged in your conversations. Yeah.
Really enjoyed hearing Robin talk about kind of mentally redesigning how she wants to start gatherings. She works mostly virtually, and so how to help people make that transition from where they've been, which is anywhere physically or mentally, to this presence, which is a unique kind of way of being.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Lori is thinking about how to close out a group that's been together for 5 years, and this is their last year, and a lot of emotion that goes along with that. And yeah, so just starting to grapple with how do you do that.
What a privilege and luxury to have to work with a group of 5 years. Like, that's not common in my space. And get paid for it, I'm assuming. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Anything else? Or other groups? Margaret, Ushimi?
Yeah, I think in our group, we talked about just being able to incorporate some of these things into what we're doing right now, but just being able to kind of build them up a bit more. I'm working on an event that's coming up in January, so this has really helped me think about how I'm going to build that invitation. And then I'm also going to be supporting these people to do some designing. So I also thought about maybe bringing in some of the things you talked about, like what you talked about, share them with them as they're working on the design that they're working on.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we also talked about when we do any kind of coaching or any training, we start with something, the grounding technique, which is very, very important so that everybody has a clear purpose and their mind is not moving here and there. We do something as a calming of the mind exercise, a small meditation, so that everybody is in the here and now rather than just, concentrating on some of the emails or sometimes you have some meetings, you keep on thinking about that. So I think that takes away the major portion. So grounding or the calming of the mind exercise is very important.
Yes.
And I think I really resonate what you just mentioned about the awareness building, why each workshop needs to have why you are here, why others are there, and the knowledge that you need to bring across, and also the purpose, how do you connect with the larger goal, the larger objectives of why people are investing in this particular workshop. I think these are very, very important. And yeah, I think that's what I think we kind of try to do.
Yeah. And I love it. And it makes me think of Fernando and I were just talking before y'all jumped in about the importance, like how LS, you got to know like how each part that you're doing ties to the next, and the intentionality is there throughout. So one of the things I love about LS is that they're kind of baked in a way to rituals, if you will, these kind of workshops where you have to be very thoughtful of why we're here and how are we doing it in a way that's co-created. I think that's quite powerful. The other thing I was going to say was, because people will be distracted from time to time. Like they'll have, in a coaching session, it's a little more, it's okay for them to, not have access to their email. But I think just knowing how the mind works, baking in those moments for like, hey, half an hour email check, and then put it away. Because otherwise you got people like checking their phone. It's like, well, let's come out like, hey, I'll give you some space for that, but then afterwards, let's really honor that. And so again, it's kind of like both and. How do you lean into those spaces as well? Wonderful. One thing I was mentioned for the virtual space in particular, I have a little section here, which was, for virtual meetings. Again, you've done the training with Fernando and the group, and you know this, but like, here's some kind of ways that I think, allow for some of the weaving in some of these elements when you're doing virtuals, which is again, using music to open a transition, or like a moment of reflection. Like I didn't have it set up to go, but like in that moment of silence, like putting some classic, some like non-verbal, like nice music for like kind of getting into that space. Visual check-ins, I inviting people to share how they're doing in different ways, be it like through filters or like showing something, depending on the culture, but something visual. Create breakouts with care. So again, it's about like not having 8 people in a room in like 2 minutes, but being thoughtful, like, hey, how many people, how much time do you give them? Really kind of supporting that connection to other, right, that we talked about earlier on. Oftentimes, using co-creation documents, Google Doc, Mural, all these things, having a shared artifact that can then be, can symbolize a lot of that. That's also why we are also huge fans of graphic facilitation when the client can pay for it, both online and in person. It's a huge, just kind of like memento of what happened, right? And then the other thing is just like really kind of honoring the silence, like not forcing people to have to speak, not forcing people to turn their cameras on, like really honoring people's space as they're showing up. I think that's really kind of some of the ways that you can just bring someone more of that humanity into the space, and therefore more of these kind of like the essence of these rituals. Other comments, questions, reactions about either the small group, if you want to unpack a little more of the agenda, or anything's been shared so far?
Question that just came up for me when I was talking with Robin, I just really began to realize how many feelings will be part of this upcoming workshop for everyone involved, including for me, as I say goodbye to these folks. How transparent are you with your partners as you're co-creating about this feel your feelings purpose, or that kind of guiding principle? How do you navigate that without making it too big a deal, but making it meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it always depends on context, right? But just kind of give you some response to that. So I usually will just talk about I'll normalize complexity, and again, bring the fact that I love Walt Whitman's quote, I am large, I contain multitudes, and just really kind of saying, hey, after 5 years, you're probably feeling it. I know I'm feeling it. There's going to be a lot of emotions about this. Now the question is, what do we want to do with them? Is it just witnessing them? And that's totally fine. Is there so again, going like, who's it for? What's it for? So if that's your North Star, how does you leaving space for the feelings support you in that overall objective? Now, in the book, I also mentioned, I have like a chapter on co-creation rituals, and I have 2 questions that I think might be interesting in this particular thing, which is, asking them what wants to be felt now, and then what needs to be witnessed. Rituals are so powerful because they activate the power of witnessing. Even if you're yourself, you're witnessing yourself. But in group settings in particular, the witness activity is profound. And so how do you think about what wants to be witnessed by whom? What does it mean? So even just thinking of that question might also give some insights or some ideas about that. But I might actually ask these questions to the co-design team. Hey, like acknowledge that there's, I'm anticipating a lot of these things, and maybe even like mini processing with them. I'm assuming they're part of the groups. Like, how are you seeing it? What are you feeling? How do we weave some of that? If you're feeling that, imagine the 10 or 15 or 20 other people, then what can we do about that? But I definitely, I lean in with the emotional part. Like, I think it's part of like our brand or ethos that you facilitate. Like we think that's because this is about, at you facilitate, we talk about we're experts in the messy human stuff. Is the messiness is about the emotions, is the cultural, is the miscommunications, is not the theory or practice. Like we can intellectually understand that. It's like the messiness of it all and what it means. The other thing is, I know I said what do you want to do with this stuff, but I would also encourage you to fight against the urge to do something with it. I think also just like sitting with that and then letting things emerge and reflecting on that can be sufficient. They don't have to turn this into something else, unless that's kind of baked into it. I don't know if this is like the end of the 5 year, there's going to be a new cycle, or there's any follow-up, or this is like really the ending. But if it's the ending, like let it end. Let it really kind of, and I think in some ways, one of the things that we face as a society, which is again why rituals are so important, is that we're so afraid of death and dying. We're so afraid of things deteriorating. I mean, that's why the back of the eco cycle is so powerful, right? It's like, how do we allow things to die, symbolically speaking, so they can then be rebirthed? And like, I think I would lean heavy into that. Not without having to figure out like what's going to be born, but like, what do we want to like, what are we letting die? How do we feel about that? What do we want to honor in the death of this? And what does it bring for us? What does it raise for us to let this beautiful process die? How do we become and how do we change over the past 5 years? I mean, these are like big, heavy questions that I would then invite the co-designer team saying, hey, these are heavy questions to think through. Like, how much time do we set for this? It shouldn't be 10 minutes. It should maybe like a 90-minute session, like a closeout, right? So those are things that I would probably bring it up in that framing.
Great, thank you. Very helpful.
Robin.
Yeah, related to that, Lori, something came to mind. Stephen Covey says begin with the end in mind, right? So for your final time together, year together, whatever it's going to be, and feeling the feelings, it made me think about an idea of a memorial service, so to speak, but what you recognize and want to bring forward from the 5 years. To close on that note, but obviously, like Andrés says, it's, context and what do the people really want out of it, but with the begin with the end in mind kind of concept.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great.
How are you feeling about the closing?
Thank you. Very thoughtful. I'm sad. It's been a great project. A wonderful human to work with. Yeah, and the beauty of it is that they've created something that they hope to share out. So we get to end, but part of the ending is figuring out how to share it.
Yeah.
So there's baked in like light on the other side. And so in a sense, we're composting our experience into a different new life.
And that's the other thing you just mentioned, compost. I often try to find language and metaphors that the client says that is a visual that can anchor the feeling. So if compost is something that resonates with the folks, it can be, because then you find all these symbols that allow you to play into the structures that you design. Again, not sure, if maybe it's a group that's all about sailing and seafaring, whatever, like find sea metaphors. If it's farming, compost. So I think let that come from the client or suggest some to them that resonate. But again, because I think oftentimes in nature, we have so much rich symbolism that allows us to process what we're experiencing, and that can inform the design that you're trying to go for.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
I know personally, like I did theater in high school, and it was such a rich bonding experience, right? And I remember, like, for me, it was the same as when we were working with clients. When I was a solopreneur, I had this deep connection to the client months at a time, and then it ended, and it was like a huge vacuum. It's like, what the hell? You just like, and so part of actually why I started Facilitate was because I'm an extrovert, as you can tell. I need people. I like connecting with people. So I ended up building a community and a company where I have that in an ongoing way. I still feel the loss of the client in some ways, but more often than not, the client asks for more work. As this is your case, like they'll come back for more work in another environment. And one thing I'll just pitch to say, if you ever are working with a client where you need more support, I'm sure you have your network, you have connections, but if you ever need people in different countries, different language skills, we're happy to partner for those opportunities.
Thank you.
And Fernando was sharing some really cool things, the brief walking as a potential LS. And thank you for sharing the link on LS in development. I always forget about those. So thank you for that. Okay, and he asks, have you thought about planning 3 or many with them? So again, some symbolism, some activity that can embody kind of the dying and rebirth.
Yeah.
And talking about closing, Andrés, we have 8 minutes for the last ritual.
Yes. Well, and I'm sure we all have our go-to closings, but honestly, like for me, it's just like I often just like to go around and just say, what's one thing that stuck out that you're staying with, a curiosity. Yeah. So want to go around, do that, and then we'll close.
I think I mostly said mine already, but just this idea of feeling feelings and how might I create and help shape the rituals that we go through, experience together over those 3 days to help all of us end well and to feel our feelings as we do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciated being here. Thank you, Andres, for everything that you shared, and to Fernando for organizing. And I really enjoyed this small group. Larger groups are awesome too. And sometimes we're led to think, bigger is better and more people and all this. But it's been really nice to be able to mostly stay in this small setting and hear and learn from each other. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
For me, when there is something synchronous in me showing up here today, when you said that rituals are about pathways to feeling and help us feel our feelings. That's kind of a theme I've been working on lately. So I don't know, things just aligned today for me to be here. I think what I'm taking away today is looking for those opportunities to build more rituals. I really appreciate all the information you shared. And I'm also going through a situation right now, which just reminded me that creating a ritual for something closing. So really appreciate everyone bringing that up today. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I often say that the kind of the driving factors for me in my life are follow your intuition, take action, and synchronicities. And so I love the synchronicities that brought you here. And it's like some things telling you're in your path, which is what this is about.
Yeah, so I would want to add, thank you very much, Andre. I think it was very, very insightful. Majorly because sometimes we try to come up with a lot of strategy, but then if the basic hygiene things are not taken into consideration, then which is the base, then other things doesn't fall, everything falls flat. So I think that is what it is very, very important to be looked at. So thank you very much for this excellent session. I think as most of most of the participants have mentioned that you have created a space for a lot of honest dialogue. I think and a lot of diverse perspective came across. I think there's a lot of good takeaways from this session. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a responsibility that we carry as facilitators to notice when a ritual is needed. Sometimes we notice, and it's our responsibility to make it happen. We don't have to name them, but we need to give the structure, give the attention and the intention to make it happen. I think we are trained and we craft our skills around this, and we know when it's needed, right? I'm just remembering the last few workshops. Yeah, that was a small ritual. Yeah, that was. Maybe now I'm putting more clarity on this responsibility for myself. Yeah, thank you, Andres.
The world needs us to. I mean, I think that the more we have spaces to feel our feelings, we will grieve more, but that's part of it. We need to grieve a lot for what's happening so something new can be born. And if we don't grieve, we'll fight it and hurt each other along the way. But thank you all for having me here. On the chat, I'm putting 3 different links. One is the Substack that will give you kind of, I have some posts there about the book and other things, so you can feel free to follow that. I have a resource page on YouFacilitate where you can download the books, the one I mentioned from 2 years ago, and the excerpt of the one that's coming up. And then my contact information in the last dot cards. So feel free to stay in touch. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Andres, for coming, for your time. Thank you, people, for coming. Robin, Laurie, Margaret, and Mushumi.
Thank you
Have
so
a
much.
good end of the year.
Yes.
Yeah, very good.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah,
You as
happy
well.
holidays for everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.